potential cybersecurity threat at U.S. ports.
Over China potentially conducting surveillance at our nation's ports.
Probe found potential national security risks.
Chinese spy cranes of cybersecurity risks.
A national security risk.
A Trojan horse is already operating inside America's most critical infrastructure, its ports. This is the conclusion of a high-level government investigation. Here's the facts. 80% of cranes at U.S. ports were manufactured by Chinese state-owned company ZPMC. In 2021, the FBI discovered intelligence-gathering equipment on board a vessel delivering ZPMC cranes to Baltimore. Investigators found unauthorized cellular modems deep inside cranes, hardware not listed in any contract. These automated machines can be controlled from remote locations. This gives a foreign entity the potential to paralyze the entire U.S. supply chain and secretly mine every transaction of American trade and military logistics. This is an FBI warning. Is China using their port cranes to map U.S. trade? This threat demands an immediate answer. To fully grasp the magnitude of the security crisis, you must first appreciate the scale and function of the machine at the center of the controversy. The ship-to-shore (STS) crane is the largest and most specialized piece of material handling equipment in global logistics. Its primary job is to lift containers weighing up to 200 metric tons from massive cargo vessels and place them onto the terminal or rail lines. They tower over 260 feet high and require extreme precision and power. Because cargo ships have grown dramatically in size, some are the length of 4 American football fields, these cranes must have incredibly long reaches to extend over the ship's entire width, a reach often exceeding 200 feet. Due to their size and specialized gantry systems, they are nearly impossible to substitute or quickly replace, making them an indispensable single point of failure for the entire supply chain. For industry veterans, the immediate concern has always been capacity and downtime. But the threat posed by these cranes operates entirely in the digital realm. This is where the industry tension truly lies. The investigation by the U.S. government centers on the unauthorized modems found inside some ZPMC cranes at American ports, installed without the knowledge of port operators. These aren't necessary for the crane's core lifting operations. These cellular modems could, in theory, allow communication outside the port's network, creating a significant security vulnerability. The modems are often concealed within the intricate cable trays and control rooms, spaces that are rarely inspected in detail by local port technicians. The operational risk is magnified by the structure of the manufacturer. ZPMC is a state-owned enterprise, and like all Chinese companies, it is legally mandated under Chinese national security laws to cooperate with state intelligence agencies when requested. This means that the data collected by these systems is potentially accessible by a foreign government. The crane, a powerful piece of lifting equipment with a boom that can reach over 260 feet, is effectively functioning as an unregulated data collector. The issue also lies in the proprietary nature of the software and the fact that the initial programming is done by the manufacturer. ZPMC cranes utilize sophisticated programmable logic controllers, PLCs, and industrial control systems, ICS, to manage every motion, from gantry travel speed to precise positioning. U.S. Coast Guard's officials found that some vulnerabilities within the software were actually openings to vulnerabilities that are there by design. This implies potential backdoors or mechanisms built into the operating code that could allow for remote intrusion or manipulation. For example, the cranes rely on sophisticated optical character recognition (OCR) systems to automatically log container IDs and report performance data back to port systems. If the integrity of the crane's firmware is compromised, that OCR system could potentially misreport data, corrupt manifests, or deliberately prioritize/deprioritize containers based on external command. the scale of data collected is massive. One of these giant cranes might execute dozens of lifts per hour, each generating a trove of logistical intelligence. Multiplied across the 80% of US ports using this technology, the continuous flow of unverified data represents a critical blind spot for US security. Can we afford to treat our essential infrastructure as just another piece of heavy machinery, or must we view it as a necessary security risk? The security concern goes deeper than just unauthorized modems. It is about the inherent design and programming of the control systems. This vulnerability is not theoretical. The US government has determined that the risk is unacceptable, citing the potential for cyber-physical attacks. A cyber-physical attack is one where digital intrusion is used to cause physical damage or disruption. This could involve manipulating the PLC to cause a spreader collision, induce excessive swaying, or simply halt the crane mid-lift on the boom, transforming the crane itself into a sabotage tool capable of derailing the entire port operation. The security experts analyzing this threat are not worried about data theft alone. They are concerned about the operational weaponization of critical logistics hardware. The sheer difficulty and expense of auditing millions of lines of proprietary code on 80% of the nation's cranes is why the U.S. Coast Guard issued its Maritime Security (MAR-SEC) directive in 2024, mandating new cybersecurity controls where none existed before. The U.S. government, through its various agencies, is now actively working to reverse engineer and secure the existing fleet, a massive and costly undertaking. However, until every line of code is verifiable, the risk remains a daily operational reality in every major American port. This is the core of the FBI warning and the greatest threat to national security: the ability to remotely shut down the machines. This is the action that forced the US government to commit billions of dollars to replacement. These modern ZPMC cranes are highly sophisticated and automated, meaning they rely on deep digital integration to operate. Their software and operating systems can, in theory, be manipulated or exploited. A U.S. congressional report concluded that the cranes could, if desired, serve as a Trojan Horse capable of helping the CCP and the PRC military exploit and manipulate U.S. maritime equipment and technology at their request. Imagine a scenario. If a foreign adversary were able to activate a remote kill switch, they could simultaneously freeze the movement of 70 or 80% of the containers moving through America's largest ports. This isn't just a business problem, this is a supply chain catastrophe. It would halt the movement of food, medical supplies, manufacturing components, and the ability of the Department of Defense to deploy resources. The reliance on these cranes is so total that a coordinated shutdown would bring national commerce to a standstill within a single operational day. This critical dependency is why the economic stability of the United States is literally being lifted and lowered by this specific brand of foreign-made machine. The cost of this potential disruption is unfathomable, dwarfing the original purchase price of the cranes. Economic studies attempting to model the fallout of a major port shutdown estimate the daily loss in commerce in the hundreds of millions of dollars, quickly spiraling into a systemic economic crisis. It is this existential threat, the industrial threat, that has forced the Biden administration to allocate $20 billion to port security and domestic manufacturing, shifting procurement away from the Chinese giant. This funding is not for routine upgrades. It is a rapid, defensive expenditure for replacing potentially compromised equipment and establishing a secure supply chain, underscoring the severity of the threat. When the cheapest product on the market comes with a remote kill switch, is it a piece of equipment or is it a weapon? The irony of this entire crisis is that these machines became dominant because of their cost advantage. This forms the crucial emotional resolution for the economic debate. For decades, port operators chose ZPMC because they could deliver a massive ship-to-shore crane for significantly less than their European or Japanese rivals. ZPMC cranes typically cost 40% less than Western competitors, a savings enabled by state support, subsidized steel, and cheap labor. This economic strategy created an illusion of choice. Buy the expensive crane or save millions with a ZPMC option. The initial savings were too significant for local port authorities, often operating on tight budgets and facing pressure to modernize, to ignore. The core of ZPMC's competitive edge is vertical integration and state subsidies. While Western crane makers rely on numerous independent suppliers, ZPMC controls its entire supply chain, from the raw steel production to the complex proprietary PLC software, meaning it avoids the profit margins of external vendors. This high degree of vertical integration means ZPMC dictates the technology, the components, and the final price with little external oversight. Crucially, the subsidies provided by the Chinese government, often in the form of cheap loans, land grants, and tax breaks, mean ZPMC can sell their equipment at prices that would simply bankrupt a competitor operating without state-level financial backing. This price distortion is the illusion of choice that the global market accepted for decades. The US market is now facing the costly but necessary transition to domestically produced or trusted allied cranes. The sheer expense of replacing these massive assets is immense. A single, new, secure SDS crane can cost between 10 and 15 million US dollars, and replacing dozens across multiple major ports requires capital expenditures in the hundreds of millions. The US government is funding US-based manufacturers and Japan's Mitsui E&S to ramp up production of cranes with verified, secure technology. This move marks a shift away from purchasing purely on price toward valuing supply chain resilience and cybersecurity as non-negotiable specifications. The realization is that the savings achieved by buying the cheaper crane were never real. The deferred cost was hidden in the massive national security risk that the US is now forced to pay. The cheapest equipment turned out to be the most expensive liability. The issue is not confined to America. The ZPMC dominance extends globally, controlling 70% of the world's container crane market, with their cranes operating in over 300 ports worldwide. This is a global problem where the digital vulnerability in one major port can be exploited or replicated elsewhere. The implications for international trade partners, including allies in Europe and Asia who also rely heavily on ZPMC equipment, are now under urgent review. The US initiative is setting a precedent for global cybersecurity standards in maritime logistics. The US response is not just defensive, it is a strategic industrial policy. The funding initiative is aimed at creating trustworthy crane production capacity at home, ensuring future equipment adheres to stringent US safety and cybersecurity standards. This involves detailed requirements for the operating software and components, closing the vulnerabilities that the US Coast Guard found were inherent to the foreign design. New domestic production centers, such as the effort to build cranes in America with Japanese technology, signal a shift back toward verified supply chains and manufacturing transparency. The response is an industrial awakening, recognizing that essential infrastructure cannot be separated from national security. This commitment is not being made with words, but with the massive, decisive investment necessary to secure the logistics backbone of the entire country. Thanks for watching Hard Hat Industries, your source for serious machines doing real work. If you like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Until then, keep your head down and your gear running.